So we'll continue talking about the discussion on how to meditate. We have to realize that meditation is not an act. Meditation is an attitude. And when you have attitude, you are in that process of meditation 24/7. So every act we have to analyze, at some point try to understand that every action that we do is ultimately caused by the thoughts. And there is not much of a difference in spirituality between the thoughts and the action, because every action, the force behind the action is the thoughts. So ultimately, when you want to change your action, you have to change your thoughts. Without thoughts, you cannot act. And of course, thoughts go back to vasanas and vrittis and all these things. So once we understand the whole mechanism of an action, whether you are living, talking, breathing, speaking to everybody else in the society, doesn't remain much different than the meditation, so-called meditation by itself. Because in meditation, you deal with all those people, all those objects, all those situations anyway, in the form of thoughts. But only thing is that in the material world, when we are acting outside, we look only the material aspect of our action. Only the thoughts which have materialized is what we see as an action. But spiritually speaking, there is not much difference between thoughts and actions. So if we start developing a habit of dealing with the thoughts the way we're supposed to in meditation, the way we learn that you're supposed to observe the thoughts. The thoughts will come. You're not supposed to create new thoughts. You're not supposed to attach to the thoughts that are there, and you're not supposed to follow the thoughts. So basically you become an observer. And at some point you reach to the spot that you realize that who is observing the thoughts? There is no shape or size or to that entity which is making the process of observation. So the way we observe the thoughts, we have to start learning how to observe our own actions in the outside world. Because every action that we do is again initiated by the thoughts. And the thoughts come from somewhere. At some point, some unknown phenomenon is generating these thoughts, right? So we have to start learning this process where the thoughts are being generated, something is happening within us which is allowing the thoughts to be generated, and they are dictated which direction the thoughts are flowing, and all these things, mechanism, if we understand, for that you require awareness. Awareness is coming from somewhere, and we don't know where it's coming from, but we have the awareness. Human beings are the only one who have awareness to realize the self. Animals have awareness which is limited. They are limited to the point that they know what to eat, where to sleep, what comforts to think of, and that's it. So only when we start realizing the awareness is what we have inside, that becomes our battery, or flashlight basically, to look around and appreciate all the thoughts. So the darkness can be realized only if the light comes in. And that light is the light of awareness that we have, all of us we have. But a lot of times we act in the outside world not realizing that we have all these things. Our awareness is slipping somewhere, and it's clouded by our beliefs in the material world, our lure for material worlds, our attraction to the objects of pleasures and all these things. So even though our eyes are open, we are hypnotized. We are hypnotized by the material aspects of the Paramatma. There is really no difference between the material aspects of Paramatma and the spiritual aspect of Paramatma. It's a one continuous spectrum. Whatever Paramatma comes under the grip of our senses, we call the material world, the outside world. Whatever cannot come under the grip of our senses is spiritual aspect of Paramatma. It's just the one extreme to the other extreme of the total existence. And this existence keep on rotating, going from unmanifest to the manifest, manifest to the unmanifest. The cycle just keeps going. And we are the silent observers. We are like a blackboard on which all these stories get written and then get wiped off. And then the new stories are written and get wiped off. And it's been going on. All that interplay of the solid manifestations, the molecules and atoms and all that, they create all these fantasies and the stories keep getting, but on what? On the infinite consciousness, which is the source of all the power to make things happen. So that's what we have to think, that we are the blackboard and the stories that come and go. And that includes our so-called ego, our names, our relationship with other people. All these things are stories which are being written and wiped off, and it has been written
Streaming
millions
video.
of times.
It's like a streaming video.
It's streaming, it's continuous streaming video going on, but there is a bottom line, there is an absolute permanent, constant so-called structure. It's not really a structure, an existence on which it is possible to write all these things. If you had a white blackboard and you try to write with a white chalk, you cannot see. The fact that you can see all these things happening, all the changes happening, is only because there is an unchangeable substratum present all the time, on which the changes can be visualized, can be perceived, can be understood. So for all these changes to happen, unchangeable medium has to be there. And that unchangeable medium is the Paramatma. So we have to walk around with that attitude that we are Paramatma, we are part of that Paramatma. The things that we call ourselves as we are, my name, my car, my wife, my friends, all these things are just superficial stories which have been written millions and millions of times. How much I acquired, how much did I accumulate, and then washed away again, and then I'm going to accumulate again in my next life. All these things just keep going on and on and on. All these are transient. Whatever we're doing temporarily. Everything is going to be wiped off at some point. But to realize all these things, you need the light of awareness. So our ignorance is the cause of our suffering. We believe this is permanent, even though it's not. We all know that. That's happened all the time. We see people dying all the time. We see people getting old all the time. Children being born all the time. They're getting older and dying in front of us. But we never think, we never believe it's going to happen to us. Somehow something steady inside is telling that I'm fine. And yet we know we are not fine. So with that realization, we have to move along. And then the meditation spills into your daily life. So meditation is not an act, it's an attitude.
But there's a reason why I feel that way.
Yes. We talked about that, right?
We talked about
because
that.
Deep inside, we know that we are the spirit, we cannot die. Somehow in a very, very deep layer of our understanding is there. That's what we told, like that Gorakhnath, right?
Yeah.
The guy came in to Gorakhnath, he was a very great saint at one time, and he says he wanted to commit suicide. So Gorakhnath says, fine, go ahead. He says, what kind of sadhu are you? Everybody else tells me that you should not die, that this is a gift from God, and your body, your life is so precious. And you said, go ahead and die? He said, how can I do that? He says, well, I want you to die and find out that you cannot die. When you die, only your body will die. The real death is the death of the ego. When your ego dies, that's the real death. So, jis marni maro, tis marni Gorakh mardita. So Gorakh died only once. You die only once. And then you don't have to die again. Because then your realization comes in that you are that infinite, total existence which cannot be described, which cannot be measured, it's your infinite existence is what you are. At that level, there is no way to die. Because you are not material. Only material things die. And whatever material things you do see is an illusion, which is changing all the time. You yourself are not the same that you were this morning. The guy goes to bed at night and sets the alarm. The guy who's waking up next day is not the same guy. It's changing all the time. It's just that we cannot perceive such a minute change on a day-to-day basis, for let alone second-to-second changes. We cannot perceive all these things. So we are limited. The God has made us locked into this dream. It does not let us realize the change that is happening second to second. If we could realize, we will go crazy. If we were perceiving, and if I promise you $10,000 that I'll give you tomorrow, and say, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't promise you. So the whole world is made possible by this some mysterious, beautiful dream that is set up by Paramatma. And we have to just be here, realize this transientness of the whole situation and enjoy it. Enjoy the beauty of it. That's what it is. So, the moment to moment, we have to keep that in mind, that we are the infinite existence. And once we realize that, our attachment to individual moment starts going down. Because if it is changing, why would you get attached to anything that is going to change? Not that you will not fulfill your obligations, your responsibilities and all that, but to have an over attachment to any particular object, people or situation is just not necessary. So when that attachment starts going down, the enjoyment kicks in. That's when you realize that all the sufferings comes from anxieties of the past, anxieties of the future, grief about the past, fear of attachment, all these things. Once you attach yourself to any object or a situation which keeps on changing, which is your mistake to attach yourself to them, is what generates your likes and dislikes, and all this journey of the whole life starts by your likes and dislikes. And so remaining detached is the only way to enjoy this beautiful world. So every moment offers you that choice, that you have that choice to make every moment. And the choice that you should make is the choicelessness. You do not choose any particular moment. Whatever moment comes in front of you, you enjoy. And you find out the pleasure in every single moment. If you can do that, and if you develop that art of living, you will be done for the rest of your life. You will not have any problem. Because you're not worried about consequences. You're not worried about future anymore. Whatever is done in the past, you don't care at this point. Because it was not done by you. Somebody else did it. Once you realize this concept, then you can remain in that state where you can derive pleasure from every single moment. And remember, life is an accumulation of billions and billions and trillions of these moments. If you start learning to have a pleasure at every single moment, believe me, no one can stop you from being in the bliss all the time. So every moment that comes in front of you is offering you that opportunity to derive the pleasure. But we spoil it. We don't realize this. We talked about, we see a beautiful girl, and then all of a sudden he says, how come my wife is not so beautiful? How come my girlfriend is not so beautiful? I wish, even if you don't have a girlfriend or a wife, you will say, oh, I wish I had that girl. As soon as you see something, you want to own it. Instead of just appreciating the beauty which is created by these interactions of these molecules to have a beautiful world, just like you see a flower. Why can't you just appreciate a flower instead of thinking, plucking it, putting it in a corner and walking away with it? It's just the way you're breaking the continuum that is creating that beautiful flower, the whole mechanism that is sitting there and is ultimately producing a beautiful flower, throwing the fragrance everywhere, attracting flies from everywhere. All those beautiful things happening is happening with a reason, for a cause, not just for you to pluck it and put it in your pocket and then take it home with you. You just be part of it. You enjoy. You become the enjoyer of the moment rather than possessor or owner. So that's where our mistake is. So every moment we can convert into a beautiful moment. And at the same time, by thinking in a wrong fashion, you can create unhappiness for yourself. Same moment that presents to you, that a flower comes in front of you, instead of appreciating, he says, oh, how come I cannot do that in my garden? And the guy is there, 5 seconds you have to look at that flower and enjoy. Instead of that, he's thinking, how come I cannot do this or this and that? All those things are unnecessary thoughts. Wife gets married, husband comes home late. Now, instead of accepting the fact after 1 week or 2 weeks, husband is just a busy guy. He probably is so involved with his work or whatever. Now, wife starts thinking, what if he has another girlfriend? What if he has this? What if he's that? What if he's drinking in the bar? This and that. Then he sets up detective to find this and all that may be totally unnecessary. Accepting that each moment, this is the reality. This is what you have in front of you. You have a husband who has a habit of coming home late. Instead of thinking all these 10,000 different options, which are totally groundless, you're wasting your enjoyment. Good morning. So every moment has to be enjoyed in its own beauty, and that beauty is always there for us to enjoy. But if we don't enjoy, what happens is we are developing a habit of creating unhappiness for ourselves. Then we have a devious way of looking at every single moment in a negative way, and then it becomes a habit. And then before even we realize, we keep doing this 24/7, and then at the end of the day say, I had such a lousy day. And then no wonder, every moment you had a choice to select something good over. The only time this happens when you think of Paramatma, when you think of Advait. Advait is the only thing you can compare all these transitory things, that all the things that moments have to offer it to you. And if you select, say, this particular face that you see, this girl is not as good as this girl, you're making a choice. You're making a choice, and the choices are the cause of suffering. Now, if you get another 2 or 3 friends to agree that, okay, this girl is more beautiful than this girl, agreed. But then you just have a more audience going with you, right? But instead of that, if you think of the total infinite consciousness which has created such a beautiful face, then you are offering every single moment to the higher level of consciousness. So the shift take place at the consciousness level in your deep inside your mind, and only the consciousness which can generate a beautiful face like that has a capacity to generate another beautiful face somewhere else. So you have nothing to lose, because that's all you're going to see. So one of the South Indian philosopher, she was watching the show on the TV where the Miss World was being selected, and then her granddaughters, finally she was so excited to see the girl who was selected as a Miss World. And she said, such a beautiful girl. And so the philosopher, she said that, don't you think, yes, she is very pretty, but don't you think the Paramatma who created her would be even more prettier than her? So only thing that can be better than the creation is the creator himself. So creator cannot be beat. So if you have a choice of owning one of the Picasso's painting versus Picasso himself, you would rather choose Picasso rather than one painting of a Picasso. Because if you have a Picasso, he can generate more paintings. So it's as simple as that. So we are so involved in the creations. We are not involved so much in the creator. And creator is the infinite total consciousness that is always there to creating all these beautiful things in front of you. So involving ourselves and making the choices is the cause of suffering. Once you make the choice, you are attached to the moment. Once you say, I like this, guaranteed there is something else that you don't like. And now you're running between liking and disliking. Rag and dvesh, right? So abhinivesh is the process where we consider all this material life as real. So when we consider this material life as real, we have faith in the material world that will give you some pleasure somewhere along the line, which is totally imaginary. It may happen, may not happen, but that's besides the point. But our faith in the life is called abhinivesh. That's how the Patanjali puts it. So abhinivesh is again gets attached to the life is only because of our likes and dislikes. If you had nothing to like outside, why would you run out of it? Run after it. I mean, the other day we had gathering and they danced till 2 o'clock in the morning. My choice was to go home 10:30, wake up in the morning, run and do my normal stuff, which I enjoy. And that makes me feel normal. This is my usual state of health. So Chirag says, how come you didn't stay till, we are night dancing? I said, if I thought that was the fun, I would have stayed. Ultimately, you have to believe you have to know where your fun is. If you believe that's where your fun is, then you do what you, ultimately mind always does where you put your faith in it. So if you put your faith in it, this is my pleasure, you will do that. And if I think this is my pleasure, I'll do that too. So everybody ultimately does what they believe. So if your belief is in the life, you will run after the life. But until you meditate and you realize that there is a vast consciousness which can give you the pleasure, and that Vasishtha's yoga says that I used to derive pleasure from the senses, All the sensual things used to give me the pleasure. Now I derive by not attaching myself to the senses. Before I had been deriving pleasure from attachment to the material objects. Now non-attachment gives me the pleasure. And that pleasure, you can only have it only once you experience the vast consciousness. Once you derive that pleasure of blissful state, then only realize that this is nothing. This is a sun and this is a small lamp. So nobody is denying that pleasures you derive from the material life are pleasures. Nobody is saying that it's not. Ultimately, how can you deny that if somebody is drinking a beer and enjoying life, he says, how can you say that this is not a pleasure? No one can argue with that. Pleasure is there, but there is a bigger pleasure somewhere else that is hidden within us, but we never experience that. Until we experience that, it's hard to convince people or anybody. So conviction has to happen from within. And once that happens, you have a bigger thing to compare with. So that's why we talked about the story of Jesus, where he stops that fisherman. Then he was catching fish. He says, let's go and let me teach you how to catch Paramatma instead of fish. Otherwise, what happens to the fish you catch? Then 2 days later, the fish starts rotting. You have to catch another fish. Maybe it will fill your stomach a little bit here and there, but you will keep doing it till you die. We all are catching fish. We all are running after material pleasures, and we think that there is something there. So abhinivesh is the biggest mistake that we have. And abhinivesh is dictated by our likes and dislikes of the moment. Once you like a moment, you want to go after it. You want to have more and more of those moments. If you dislike something, you run away. You make all the efforts to run away from those objects. But run is always there. And there is always something in front of us that you don't have so far. Whether it is money or relationship or Paramatma. If you make it an object to reach, your running is outside. When you stop all the running, you are there. You are always there because that is your nature. You cannot escape from it. God is always there whether you like it or not. But He is always there, but only for you to realize that. When all your running stops, that's why Rajni says, dhan chaho ya dhyan chaho. Pad chaho ya Paramatma chaho. Chahi bura sansar. Chahi sansar hai. When you desire is a wrong thing. Anything that you think that you don't have and you want to have, you make efforts to go after that, is a mistake. Stop all this nonsense and be what you are and accept every single moment. The only way you can accept every single moment if you do not make a choice. And the moment you start making choices, the suffering starts and your mistake starts.